Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. I trust your week's gone well. Let me start with the news. President Trump said yesterday the US is to place a new 10% tariff on the remaining $300 billion in Chinese imports amid slow-moving trade talks effective September 1st. And that was a catalyst for a complete about-turn, a volte-face in the markets. In October last year, I was writing about the trade war, and I quoted Douglas Dillon, the professor of government at the Harvard Kennedy School and author of Destined for War, and he said, "This geopolitical contest will likely escalate dangerously. Powerful forces on both sides are driving the world's two strongest countries toward full-fledged confrontation." The biggest level in the whole market right now is the 7 handle on the Chinese currency. This chart is from Convert Bond. Taking you back to May this year, I said the Chinese currency, which at that point was minus 8.8% on a year-on-year basis, is surely a very visible proxy. If this all turns ballistic, then this is going to fly through 7, and we're last at 696. And I said it'll slice through 7 like a hot knife through butter. Same article, May 2019, my baseline, I said, is the trade war is headed off the charts into territory the market still continues to classify as a tail risk. If there is a decoupling between the two economies, so be it. The Chinese people can endure more pain than the spoiled and hubristic Americans, was the Chinese reaction at that time. And of course, that sent the implied probability of another Federal Reserve rate cut at the next FOMC meeting in September all the way up to 95% as Trump reignited the trade war with China. US 10-year sank to below 190 after Trump said he'll impose a 10% tariff. And this is an example of Wizard of Oz level moves that I had written about in June. German yields are now negative out to 27 years, and the yield curve partly inverted, with 9-year yields at minus 0.61%, way below 3-month at minus 0.54%. The British pound fell below 121, but currently has rebounded to 121.28. In 1998, Mrs. Thatcher told the House of Commons there is no way in which one can buck the market. Home thoughts, fare thee well, most excellent High Commissioner Nick Haley. It was a pleasure to bid him farewell yesterday. And he really has made a very big impact, sophisticated, nuanced, and the breadth of his interventions are quite impressive. First, it was a heavenly body, a beacon or a world, a place where no one could possibly go. Then from 1969 to 1972, 12 people landed there in spaceships. I say leave it alone for a while. When we looked close up, we found barren sand, inanimate rock of indeterminate colour, and no urgent reason to stay. The moon abides, it rules the firmament, waning crescent, waxing gibbous. It raises the oceans and tugs at our thoughts. It still holds the key to madness, E.B. White wrote 50 years ago, still controls the tides that lap on shores everywhere, still guards the lovers who kiss in every land under no banner but the sky. Charles Le Morvan's systematic photographic map of the moon, decreasing phases 1899 to 1909. I've always wanted to have a meal at Wolf's Mouth Underground Dining. This is the tuna, squid ink, yuzu, kosher tofu creme, ponzu snap pea, green onion, wasabi pea, sesame, and mizuna. Foodies in LA are familiar with Craig Thornton and his amazing underground dining club, Wolf's Mouth. It was written up in magazines, including The New Yorker. To join, you have to sign up their mailing list for upcoming dinners notifications, usually about twice a month. You send in the request for the desired dates, and they would randomly pick guests. And on that basis, another dish, delicata, squash, cabbage, coffee, cocoa, candied peanut, cabbage, red cabbage, yogurt, carrot. Looks tasty. And staying with the theme of gastronomy, The Lost Gastronomic World of Ancient Rome is an article in the Financial Times. The ancient Romans reveled in food and drink. Meal times were a collective activity, a chance to share sensual pleasure and show off their luxurious homes. Not to exploit this was to risk comparison with beasts. As the Roman writer Seneca put it, dinner without a friend is like the life of the lion or a wolf. Food was imported as well as grown locally. The graffito on an amphora found at Pompeii announces it once held corn transported in a ship whose pilot came from Tunis. As such, it testifies to the Roman custom of buying their wheat from northern Africa. The diners supped on couches set back in a niche with a view of glittering waters before them, and to one side the fresco showing a garden complete with oleander and strawberry trees, fountain, palm tree, and statues of sphinxes intensified the sensation of being immersed in paradise. And this is a picture of Bacchus and Mount Vesuvius fresco. Political reflections, it has suddenly become one of the biggest questions in Hong Kong. What will the Chinese military do? After 8 weeks of increasingly violent unrest and more anti-government protests planned for this weekend, anxiety is growing that Beijing might call in the People's Liberation Army. China seems willing to at least feed the speculation with hints and signals, including the release of a video Wednesday showing troops practicing riot control. While a military intervention appears remote, the possibility has set nerves on edge and prompted at least one investment bank to flag it as a risk. Since Hong Kong returned to Chinese rule 22 years ago, the PLA's troops in the city have played a minimal role. Should that change, the implications for both Hong Kong and China would be enormous. The biggest fear for some is a repeat of the deadly crackdown that took place in Beijing's Tiananmen Square 3 decades ago. Beijing is unlikely to use the PLA to quell the protests until it feels it has exhausted all other levers at its disposal. However much Xi Jinping fears chaos within China's borders and that the use of the PLA is legitimate in his eyes, above all, he does not want to have the stain of another Tiananmen massacre. Wu says the principle of one country, two systems The behavior of some radical demonstrators challenging the authority of the central government and touching the bottom line of the principle of one country, two systems is absolutely intolerable, he said. The Pearl of the Orient is not to be defiled. The PLA has an estimated 6,000 troops stationed in the city. Everyone knows the consequences if China were to send in the troops, Wan said. If it does happen, Hong Kong as we know it will be over. I wrote about the tinderbox that is the periphery, and you have different responses, quite granular ones by the Chinese state. Xinjiang, which is the complete clampdown, black box, you kind of make it a hermit kingdom and close off as much as you can. Taiwan, where you've got this military pressure being brought to bear, and Hong Kong now, which is the most visible in many ways to the rest of the world. I like this photograph, 1868, ruins of the temple in Bunia, Kashmir. And that took me back to Sikh transit Gloria Mundi. And this Stonehenge, the true purpose and origin of Stonehenge, remains a contested mystery. Theories range from Merlin transporting the rocks from Ireland to the stone circle being a model for female fertility, to a calendar used for seasonal rituals and an astronomical prediction tool for phenomena like solar eclipses. Regardless, the spiritual landmark remains as one of the UK's most popular attractions. Now let's move on to international markets. It's all been a big dollar-yen move. It looks as if it's breaking an uptrend from 2013, according to Sun Chartist. And in fact, it seemingly had a premonition yesterday in that the move in the yen preceded Trump's comments. Currency markets, euro dollar just popped over 111, is back marginally below. Dollar index around 98.25. Japanese yen 106.90. We've got to keep a close eye on that. The Swiss franc 0.9882. The British pound 121.27, having dipped below 121. The Australian dollar 0.7692. I think it's going to take an almighty tumble. India rupee 69.4093. South Korean won edging towards 1200, and now you've got the spat with Japan. And just a week ago you had the Chinese and Russians putting additional pressure. 1197.58. The Rial, where they cut rates, 383.91. The Egyptian pound holding in 16.58. And the Rand, which I've written about before and is surely going to get caught up in the crossfire of the trade war, 14.5920. This is a chart of the dollar index from Blue 43. I remain resolutely bullish and see these retracements as an opportunity to get longer. Euro dollar, I think that's got lifted by dollar yen, last at 110.97. Gold, notwithstanding how I'd said I expected a deeper setback, but of course Trump pivoted gold big time, and we're last at 1438. I don't see us breaking up to new 2019 highs. Brent crude, last time I checked, $61.64. Almighty tumble in yesterday's trading hours. Crude oil fell as much as 7.9% to $53.95. We're now at $54.75. The price of Arabica coffee slumped 9% to $1 a pound last month. Biggest monthly drop since December 2016. In May, it fell as low as 88 US cents, the cheapest price in more than a decade. Emerging markets, Brazil Central Bank lowered its target by 0.5%, the lowest level on record. Emerging markets yesterday fell the most since December. That's from Lisa Abramovitz. I came across some lovely photographs in CN Traveller. This is of the Nasir al-Mulk Mosque in Iran, also known as the Pink Mosque, is famous for its stunning array of colours, thanks to a unique combination of stained glass windows and mosaics. Was built in 1888, specifically designed to take advantage of morning light and the sun filtering through the windows, creating a rainbow effect, highlighting the jewel-toned tiles and rugs in the interior. The MSCI Emerging Markets Future cratered 2.7% since Trump announced a fresh round of tariffs on Chinese imports. I've spoken previously about the China Emerging and Frontier Markets Loop phenomenon, which had been positive for more than 2 decades, but which I was saying is about to turn negative. Moving on to Africa, death on the Nile haunts Ethiopia's rebirth. This is Bloomberg. The day Semenyo Bekele was found dying at the wheel of his Toyota Land Cruiser in central Addis Ababa, doors locked, engine running, and a bullet wound to his head, he had left home holding a plane ticket and a packed bag. The plan on that July afternoon a year ago was to return to the construction site of the vast hydroelectric dam that Semenyo had been overseeing since 2011, according to his mother-in-law, Membere Mekonnen. The project on the Nile had made its chief engineer a national hero. Membere, like many Ethiopians, still doesn't believe the police finding of suicide. Why do you buy a ticket and pack your bag to go if you're going to shoot yourself, the 72-year-old said in an interview at her home in the capital. Whoever pulled the trigger, Semenyo found himself in the eye of multiple political storms that are still today battering one of Africa's largest infrastructure projects, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. Egypt has vigorously opposed the dam's construction due to concerns the project could reduce the supply of water downstream, at one point even threatening war. Heightened tensions between the country's complex patchwork of ethnic groups also threatened the project, pulling at the seams of a nation stitched from the fertile highlands and arid lowlands of a former empire. Almost 3 million Ethiopians were driven from their homes by conflict last year. Ethiopia's nationalities have been fighting against central governments for over 80 years, said Sebat Negar, a founder of the Tigray People's Liberation Front. If constitutional order isn't restored, he added, the balkanization of Ethiopia is inevitable. Over the weekend, I wrote, centrifugal forces are working against the mercurial Prime Minister Abiy's agenda in Ethiopia. Ebola crisis, Rwanda shuts the border with DR Congo to stop the spread of the virus. A priest in Goma died last month from Ebola. Early this week, an artisanal miner became the second person in the city to be killed by the disease. According to a report by AFP, a third person, believed to be the miner's daughter, is also infected. People travel every day between Goma and Gisenyi on the Rwandan side of the border, leading to fears that the disease could spread. As I've said before, it's about the escape velocity of Ebola. Ebola specifically exhibits non-linear and exponential characteristics. Once famed for hyperinflation, Zimbabwe suspends inflation data. Suffering the world's second highest inflation rate, won't publish price data for the next 6 months as unrest mounts over surging costs and shortages. Of 120 countries tracked by Bloomberg, only Venezuela has a higher inflation rate. The statistics agency will continue to publish month-on-month inflation data. That rate has also increased rapidly to 39.5% in June from just 1.7% in February. It did hit 500 billion% in 2008. As I said over the weekend, at a more granular level, Zimbabwe is a laboratory experiment, with inflation last clocking 176%. And I said there is a straw and camel's back moment, but predicting that moment is always a fool's errand. South African all shares up 8.51% year to date. Dollar rand back at the 14.5936 level. Below 14, it was a tremendous sell. Egyptian pound 16.5785, doing very well. Egypt EGX 30 plus 3.76% year to date. Nigerian all share down 11.71% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange down 6.24% year to date. Equity Group released its half-year earnings. Its earnings per share increased 9.655%. What struck me is they're holding 179.61 billion shillings worth of investment securities and another 159.43 billion Kenyan government securities, which they're classifying available for sale. Loans and advances to customers is 320.88 billion, and therefore 53.08% of their total assets are in Government of Kenya securities. This trend is actually replicated across all the banks, and therefore any downgrade is going to hurt them very, very quickly. However, what equity has done is taken a very defensive posture. And the moment that rate cap act is amended, they will have a lot of firepower. Kenya Re reported half-year earnings per share slid 12.5%. Gross premiums rose 39.911%, but gross claims incurred surged 47.4661%. Kenya shilling strengthened to below 103. Last time I checked, it was at 103.10. Let me have a quick look. We're last at 103. There's no doubt in my mind that the central bank intervened yesterday. Nairobi all share up 5.6%. NSE 20 down 7.58%. And with that, I wish you all a tremendous weekend.